Hi guys, John here from Optics Warehouse. So today we're going to be doing a little bit of a mount roundup. Obviously what we're going to do, we're going to go through the mounts we've got in front of us and obviously the different uses and obviously fitments that we've got here today. So let's start. We've got the classic BKL mount. So this is a 9 to 11mm dovetail. They do have specialised 13 and 14 mils, but as I say in front of us, this is the 9 to 11mm. The way this works, it's called a self-centering mount. So although you can do it up from one side, the split through the centre allows both sides to clamp in evenly when you're putting it onto your rifle. So this hopefully sets the scope nice and true and means you don't have to use tons of windage to get the scope zero to start with. These are the single strap variants. They do have double strap as well, which obviously give you that bit more support on the scope and that bit more bite into the dovetail itself. These are more suited to deeper dovetailed air rifles or rimfires. So things like your, for example, air rifle and Air Arms S500 series or higher, or your day state air rifles, they've all got real deep dovetails. If you compare that to something like a spring gun dovetail or an Air Arms S400, you're going to find that as you clamp this down, on the Air Arms S400 series, it will lift the edges of the dovetail slightly, and on the spring rifles, you're going to find that the dovetail doesn't fit quite as well as it should, and can cause slippage when it's under the recoil of that rifle. So the next set of mounts we're going to look at is the Sports Match. Obviously these are the Wolf brand Sports Match, but the same Sports Match you know and love. With this you've got the standard foot clamp on here. It is reversible on there to give you a slightly wider dovetail for a 3/8 rail, but these ones in particular are your fully adjustable. So they give you height and windage adjustable, all done on grub screws around here, that once you put the scope on the rifle, you can set it up nice and centrally so you keep the scope in optical or mechanical centre. These are generally 2-strap mounts or double screw mounts on here. So as I say, it does give that extra biting clamp onto the dovetail, and also it just gives you 4 screws over the top of the mount to keep that scope nice and secure. Being Sports Match, it does have a recoil pin as well, so it does make these more suited as well for a spring-powered air rifle with recoil stop if need be. So moving on to some upmarket dovetails, we now have the Tier 1. As you can see once again, it's a very deep cut dovetail on here, so you're going to be using that once again with your Anschutz rimfires, that sort of style, or your day states, Air Arms and any deep cut dovetail. Nice feature of the Tier 1s, you've got the bubble level in there, which helps you make sure your rifle's straight and also helps you set up the scope to make sure that's level, as long as that mount is sitting, as I say, really nicely onto a deep dovetail. So you've only got one screw on the side here, but being a torque screw and being titanium, it does give you a lot more bite on there. So you can nip it up nice and tight without the worry of anything shearing or any slipping there. Also, you've got the 4 screws on top. Once again, they're Torx head screws and titanium screws. So plenty of bite there and not having to worry about any rust, making them go all solid and having difficulty undoing them at a later date. So that sums up the dovetails to a degree. We're now going to move on to Picatinny mounts and the difference between them. So following on from the Tier 1, we've got Tier 1's tactical rings. So you can see these are a really heavy duty ring. Goes back to having 2 clamping screws for the feet. Real solid Picatinny bar in there as well. And internal of the ring here, you've got some lines in there, which once again help grip the scope. And if you do decide you want to put some sort of thread lock onto the scope itself, which a lot of people have tended to do on high recoiling rifles, it just allows that to sit in nicely and glue the scope in place as well. It's not something I would personally do. I find the mounts grip perfectly fine as they are, but there is no sort of harm in doing so. Just remember that it can damage the scope when you take them off in future once you put that finish and grip in there. So these are 6 screw across the top, so it does give a lot more clamping pressure on there, but instead of crimping the scope when you do have that clamping pressure on a high caliber rifle when you're not using a torque wrench, this spreads it out. So it stops any damage occurring to your scope tube. Moving on to one of my favourites for the price, we've got the UTG Pro Rings. Now, I just really like the finish of these and the way they're built, and they're only come in at around about the £60 odd, so quite middle of the range for a set of mounts, and obviously quite cheap for what's called a premium set of mounts. Once again, one clamp in the side there, but it's also got a steel foot clamp on there. So there's no bending or issues about the aluminium, paired with the rest of the aluminium mount, creating quite a lightweight mount with very high quality fitments and fixtures. So you've got no grip rings in here. Obviously, as I say, it is one of the cheaper end of the mounts, but once again, one of my favourites. And you've got torque screws here as well, so nice and easy to do up and nice and easy to use. With these, once again, you've got the Picatinny locking bar there. I'll come into a little bit more detail in a second about the difference between Picatinny and Weaver. But that shows you, once again, a different style of ring. With the Barist ones here, this one has inserts in the ring. So you've got the same style 6 screw as your tier 1, but this has got plastic inserts. Now what this allows you to do is it allows you to have multiple MOA adjustments inside it. So if your scope or your rifle ends up sitting off to one side, you've got up to 40 MOA to use in any direction you'd like internal to the ring. So it really does help with setting up any troublesome rifles, or if you're pairing it with night vision like a Photon XT or RT, it allows you to get a perfectly centralized zero without the issues of shimming or shaving bits off of the mounts to try and get you where you need to be. So moving across again, we now have two of the budget ends of the 6 screw rings. We've got the Vortex ones here, very good for the money. You're looking at sub 50 quid, and that gives you a 6 screw ring that's never going to go anywhere. Look underneath there, and it's also got nice solid locking bar, but that is a Weaver bar in there, so that will fit onto a Weaver rail. Move on to again, you've got the Hawk rings now. So these are Hawk 6 screw Picatinny. So on these, once again, you've got a Weaver locking bar, so a little bit slimmer than the Picatinny. Your single one clamp for doing it up onto the rail, and although it's steel, it's quite a thin locking bar there, so it doesn't look particularly great, but it's more than strong enough to cope with all your needs for that. Also, what you find with cheaper sets of rings, you've got a felt pad in here. To be honest, they say it's there to protect the scope. The first thing I do with any set of mounts that have got the felt pads is remove them completely. Hot and cold weather can then change your point of impact if it's in there, because the glue can move during the heat and then the scope can slide during recoil as well. So that for me personally is just, you want to remove them. Nothing wrong with these for the price. They do the job they say, but as I say, just remove that pad and you shouldn't ever have any issues. So we're now going to move on to the one-piece rings that we've got here. It's got two types here. We've got the spur, which is their real premium end mounts that you're never ever going to have an issue. They are the most solid mounts you're going to buy. And then you come down to this one, which is the American Defense. Once again, very solidly built, but a bit more budget orientated compared to the spur. By no means are these cheap. You're still looking at around about the £200 mark. However, if you go too cheap on one-piece mounts or quick release mounts, they're never going to be returned to zero, and each time you take them off and put them back on, you're going to find your point of impact has moved more than what you would actually like it to. So unless you spend £400 plus, or the spurs at bare minimum, you're not going to get a true return to zero. However, they are very, very close and will put you within 1 or 2 clicks realistically of your previous zero. With these, as you can see, they're vertically split on the mounts. So once again, like the spurs we talked about in a previous video, the thin sides on this allow you to see your turret and see your side focus nice and clearly without any interruptions. These come in various different heights, but you won't find a low mount generally in a one piece because you need the clearance of the saddle from that bottom there. So you're generally going to be looking at medium high and extra high, so on, for the one piece mounts. Last bit I want to touch base on, you might have heard me mention about Picatinny and Weaver earlier on. Most rails look the same between Picatinny and Weaver. The only differences you're ever really going to notice is the locking slot on a Picatinny is just over 5mm. The locking slot on a Weaver can be anywhere from that 5mm, or just under that 5mm, right the way down. There's no actual designated size for a Weaver rail. So it's very difficult sometimes to match it up. But generally you'll find a 3 to 4mm locking bar that will fit into most Weaver rails. So that sums up our roundup of the rings that we've got in front of us. If there's anything you'd like to know, please feel free to drop us an email or give us a call, and we'll get back to you with the information we can. Thanks for watching.